Good morning. Welcome to Books at the Bottom of the Stairs. My name's Lorraine. I'm going to talk to you about Nonfiction November, week number 2. It's been a really good week as far as I'm concerned. I have been meeting my targets, which, I didn't tell you guys about, but I have been meeting my target goals. And the book that I just finished for this week, I really, really liked. But I'm going to take you back to the books that I'm going to, read over the course of the month. The Tides of Time, Nova Scotia Book of Seasons by Suzanne Stewart, which I was pretty frustrated with last week. This week's 2 chapters were not so bad. Or did I only do one? I might have only done one. It was on the topic of making cheese. January, making cheese. It was a lot more coherent. The writing wasn't quite so... I guess, when you write about nature, and some people see a bird and then all of a sudden we have a discussion about the merits of flight or the audacity in stealing a berry, or I don't know, I'm not sure that nature writing requires adjectives and adverbs and except, or like in a poetic kind of way. A crow is a crow is a crow is a crow. If a crow is doing a crow thing, if you're having some kind of philosophical experience with a crow, then okay. But basically, if you're just passing a crow as you run down the road in your morning jog, I'm not sure that, poetics is part of the story. But that's me being a something. Making cheese. It was kind of interesting. There is a place up in Antigonish area, and this is new information to me, where there's a cheesemaker and they have their own milk. Now, one of the interesting things, which is a side fact, is that all the milk has to go into a central stream. If you've got dairy cows on your farm, you can't necessarily use your own dairy products to make cheese. So it's got to go to the centralized spot, then you use any complicated. So in this particular case, there's a farm that has milk production going on, and at the same time they're making cheese. And the cheese sounds pretty good. I'm really interested in trying to find out the name of the company, which is probably in here, and find out where their cheese is sold, because I don't recall having ever come across any cheese that's made from that neck of the woods. I know there are 2 other cheesemakers in the province, but anyhow, so it was interesting. We went to the farm. It's cold. The first visit, we are seeing mostly the cheese production side of things, although because of really, really strict hygiene standards, this lady, the author Suzanne, is not allowed to see much of it. And then the second time she goes to visit, she gets to see the cows and the dairy, the milk extraction process, and the cows, and she goes into this thing with these ideas in her head about how cuddly and warm and fuzzy these big cows are going to be, and that it's going to be she forgets that it's freezing cold. She forgets that cows are big animals who really basically want to just chew their cud. It's so misplaced romanticism. I wish she just would deal with what she says she's going to do. Thoreau is being quoted quite often, and yeah, okay. It was a better chapter. All right, the second book that I read a single chapter from, because boy, Angela Davies really knows how to pack a lot of information into a chapter. So this was chapter 2 of Blue Legacies and Black Feminism, Angela Davies. And chapter 2 is called Mama's Got the Blues. And she is, again, still using the same 3 women's blues songwriters. Blues singers, there we go, blues singers, female. Well, what she's talking about in this chapter is basically how the songs themselves are sort of one of 2 things. They seem to be either discussing the number of times that men have done them wrong, or they are warning songs and just, giving out advice to the community. So how these songs are used as an expression of sexual encounters, but a relationship encounters as well, both as a personal experience and how things went right or went wrong, or they're being used as warning songs to other women in the audience, and just what to look out for. So if such and such a man is a real smooth talker and always wants you to buy him a suit, then you know you haven't really got a good man on your hands. He's going to do you wrong sooner or later. So it's really, it's kind of a fun chapter in a way, because one of the things she does is go through a number of the lyrics. And there's one set of lyrics with Bessie Smith and another singer called Clara Smith. They're not related. And these women were considered to be, what's that word? Rivals, with, both in terms of their professional lives, but also in terms of their attractiveness to men. And so what ends up happening is this particular song is the two of them are singing together, and they are having a conversation about, I think you just took my man. And she's like, well, yeah, I did, but you know, he still wants you. And well, what are we going to do about it? And so they decide that they're both going to have the same man, but no, he doesn't know that they're both no. So it's an interesting little threesome that's going to take place. Yeah, I think really enjoyed this particular chapter. Every once in a while I would get bogged down in the density of the language, and because I say she really does use language to express her point, and so it's not oversimplified and it's not over romanticized. And one of the things she does talk about is the call and response. That is a large part of women's blues in terms of, you know, this is part of the warning system for talking to the audience, is that the singer will sing a line and then the audience will quite often respond back with a line. And so this is a way of having an actual communication with the listening audience. So it's still a community sort of event in that there is audience participation, but we've moved completely away from the community experience of the Gospels or the songs from the fields. So this is a shorter book than I thought it was, because somewhere around page 200, a large section of the book are the lyrics of the songs of both Gertrude Ma Rainey and Bessie Smith. I do not know why Billie Holiday's lyrics aren't in here, and there is not really there isn't really an introduction saying why these two singers and not the third singer. But so the book is a lot shorter than I thought, and yeah, there are some pictures. Woo! There in the middle. Yeah, so I don't have that many more chapters to go. I think that it's going to be quite easy to finish this book. And what's fun about it is I recognize a number of the songs. Didn't really realize how is the word ubiquitous, you know, where the lyrics are just out there in the world. They're not, some of the songs are definitely unknown to me, but the ones that are referenced most often are songs that you're probably familiar with one way or another. So, still a good solid book. The third book that I read in its entirety is From Here to Eternity by Caitlin Doughty, Traveling the World to Find Good Death. Now, one of the things that Caitlin Doughty does that I think is quite interesting is that she identifies herself as a death carer, C-A-R-E-R, so that she thinks of herself not so much as, it's not just looking after the corpse after someone has died, it's also looking after the community, whether the community is a family of one or the community is a family of 30 or 40 people. So in her funeral home, there is a significant effort to include as many people as possible in the process of what to do with the remains of someone. So this is not a book really about dying. But what she encounters are people who are either having conversations about what's going to happen with their body at the end, or with families who are looking at the same question, but the person has already deceased. So if you're like squeamish about death, I don't think this is a particularly bad book to stick your nose into, because it's really dealing from post-death. So this book is definitely traveling the world. She is in Japan and in Peru. She's in Mexico. I thought the chapter on Japan was difficult to get my head around. There's so many things in Japan in terms of well, let's see, there's just so many cultural things that I'm so unfamiliar with. And so just to kind of summarize Japan, they have a significantly large section of the population that is aged, and many of them have such a long lifespan that they may have outlived direct families. And so when it comes to their own deaths, they have, you know, what they grew up with as a custom. The relatives that remain are, you know, 2 or 3 generations younger. They might be great-grandchildren. So there's a schism between what the elders would expect at a burial session and what the young people are willing to stick their necks out for. And so we've got tradition and we've got technology. And also a lot of Japanese are Buddhists. And the Buddhist faith is fairly flexible about new technologies. And so there's a very interesting Buddhist temple that has Buddhas, about 1,000 Buddhas, and each Buddha represents an individual that has passed away. So you can go and you can tap in your card, and the Buddha that represents your family member will light up. And it doesn't sound as garish. I mean, it sounds garish, but from what I understand in the text, it's that they have spent an awful lot of effort into making an aesthetically pleasing lighting up Buddha. I don't think it's not like going to Disney and, you know, poking your nose at Goofy. So it sounds rather nice. And one of the other things that Japan has done is really explored the technology around things like cremation and group deaths, and it was just very interesting. And the other chapter that was very interesting was, oh my goodness, it wasn't Peru. Was it Peru? There's a group of people out there that, let me just see if I can find, Mexico. Well, there's a couple of things that happen. In Mexico, the big parade of the Day of the Dead actually was invented for that James Bond movie, where you see James Bond going through this parade of skeletons and dead. And so what happened is that Mexico picked that up as part of a political statement. It helped for Mexico to coalesce around a national experience. They have always had the Day of the Dead as part of their celebrations or festivals or what have you, but they've never had that kind of Mardi Gras parade that goes with it. So that whole movie kind of acted as a stimuli for Mexican self-identification. And certainly they do the things that you've heard about in other locations where they do going to visit the graves and so on is all true. But it has come out of it's kind of come out of the underground in a sense, in that they've reestablished their connection to their death rituals. Where there was another place, and I'm just trying to think where it took place, that the actual bodies of the deceased are disinterred, they're mummified, and so the dead are brought back to visit the living, and it is in Mexico. It's a very, I don't know what if you walked past somebody's front porch and the uncle was sitting in the lawn chair and had a cigarette in his mouth and a drink beside him on the table, and he'd be dead for 15 years. It just would happen to be maybe the anniversary of his death or the anniversary of his birthday, or whatever. The relatives missed him, and so they disinterred him, and he's come up and they've brought, they've cleaned everything off, given him a new set of clothing. He's sticking around for a couple of meals, and then they'll reinter him. And this is like something that they have done for, it's not new. It's fairly very old, and so just very interesting way of approaching the death of a family member, is that in a way the family member has not died, because They still show up for weddings. um, so there was another one that was quite interesting in terms of a young woman who had lost her infant child, and so they're going through the grieving process from her point of view, because I guess, yeah, grieving for her in North America was not really something that she could do the way that was right for her. That our culture has got this big distance between the death event and grief, and this is what other cultures do not have such a great gap between. That having a grief as an accompaniment to your life is a normal thing in many other cultures. And for this young woman who'd lost the baby in utero, she never really got to grieve this child that wasn't properly buried. And so I think she goes with Caitlin to Mexico, and in the process there's a family that is celebrating the death in a graveyard of a young child. And so she stops and stays with this family for the rest of the evening and experiences the grief in the morning. Yes, by participating in someone else's, another family's death situation, she is able to go through her own. So the consequences of that is the discussion about how in North America we just have so much distance between we no longer have wakes in the house, for instance, or we have got, particularly in America where it costs so much money, you only get your funeral home for a short period of time where the visitation hours are, for instance, or you only get a certain size room, and so you can only have a couple of people in at a time, so you don't necessarily get a room that a large group of people can gather in because it's so expensive. So one of the things that's under discussion is the funeral industry itself, in terms of how much they charge for everything. And this is not just the embalming and the casket, this is also just things like, if you're going to have 6 rooms and there's 6 funerals going on, you can have a billboard that says, you know, Bill Smith, and then you can have a billboard that has Johnny Smith, but it's got a big picture and it's got a little bit of music, and you know, so that all is a decision made not on what the family wants, but what the family can afford. And so the funeral industry in North America and in other European countries as well has got its fingers in every kind of financial aspect that you can imagine. And like Steve and I well, it was me, in all honesty, it was me. We had a death in the family, it was unexpected, I kind of freaked, and so we've prepaid our funerals to a large extent. We have not purchased the urns that our ashes will go into. I thought the kids might like to do that. And we have not picked where we would be interred. And of course, one of the things is that certain different countries, different provinces, states have got different rules around the scattering of ashes. So we kind of voted for urns. Well, I say we. It was the royal we. I'm not sure Steve had any choice. Because my game plan was to take out as much strife as possible for the kids. It's like, I thought, of all these years of trying to hold a family together, the last thing I want is to die and have my kids fighting over the cost of a coffin or the cost of a funeral arrangement, or like, I just thought, what a way to end it all, is to have everybody be angry. So I thought, well, I'll just make these decisions for them and pay for it all. And so it's all done. We completely got I got snafuzzled by the whole thing. Now, one of the other things that's come about in the last 10 years or so since I made those decisions are more ecologically friendly end of life, end of body care situations, like recomposting, for instance, which I think is marvelous. Your body can go into a capsule that has all the ingredients that are necessary for the deterioration of the body. And so within, depending on the size of the body and its state of health before you go into the pod, it can take 3 to 5 years and you're back to the soil. Now, one of the things I talk about is, you know, with cremation, you get to go back into the soil if your ashes are scattered. Well, actually, nix on that idea. There is nothing of any nutritional value at all in those ashes. It's devoid. It's like gravel. Well, it's probably not even as good as gravel, because at least gravel provides aeration. So, yeah, you're not going back to the soil if you get cremated. But anyways, these recompositioning opportunities, I think, are on trend. But of course, the funeral, and like way less expensive, and way less toxic in terms of the embalming fluids and all that kind of business. So, loved this book, just roared through it, and I think it's a great entryway to just kind of come to some conclusions about your own once you're dead. The whole being dead, getting dead thing, that's something else. But, you know, what would you ideally like to talk about with your families? Which is a significant part of the discussion in this book, is making it a topic of conversation that is non-toxic, that is normal, that is taking the fear and the aversions right out of the picture. So I loved it. So next week, I'm moving on to this memoir of Adam Schultz. Memoir. The Whisper on the Night Wind as he travels somewhere through Canada. There's good pictures. So far, all the pictures are of him from the back, and he's wearing really loose water-resistant pants. So I can't even make a sexist comment about how cute his bum is. Yeah, too bad. So we'll see you next week. I hope all your reading dreams and adventures continue to come true, and that you've got some kind of nonfiction book on your sights. Bye-bye for now.